the not-too-distant future, the anti-feminists' worst nightmares were realized. Their greatest prophet, Sargon of Akkad's predictions turned out to be true. Indeed, the feminists did rise up and enround everyone who wasn't an ultra-leftist beta-cuck soy boy cultural Marxist. Even Jordan Peterson's masterful plan for people to clean their rooms to defeat postmodernism turned out to fall short. And once all the anti-feminists, liberalists, alt-righters, and people who are just really interested in hearing out the facts about race and IQ
I already had an IQ test this year.
were banned off of all social media platforms and relegated to shitty apps that nobody cares about, everything finally became a utopia. Well, except we never ended up dealing with capitalism, so the future still ended up becoming a cyberpunk-like hellscape. But with our job finally finished, we were able to slip back into the shadows.
Disconnect.
It's you.
You're a hard man to find.
I'm retired now. What do you want?
Well, we're reactivating your disconnect. You're the best man I got.
Reactivating me? For what?
We recently recovered this.
It's just, what the hell is that?
That right there is the last undebunked reactionary video.
Reactionaries? I hate those guys. But why bother debunking it? We already dealt with all of that. Is one video really going to make a difference?
Normally I would agree, but this is a special circumstance. See, the person being criticized on this here video is the mistress herself.
Dear God. Anita Sarkeesian?
And now you grasp the seriousness of this situation. So you're gonna do this willingly? Or are we gonna have to do it by force?
Look, I get the seriousness of this situation, but I only ever did this job part-time.
What? Why'd you say it like that? You said part-time, all weird.
What are you talking about? I didn't say that weird.
It's like nobody bothered to take a second take. Wait a minute. I know what you're doing. You're just doing random Harrison Ford impersonations. Knock it off.
Anyway, I'm gonna have to refuse. Look.
I love the cyberpunk genre. From Neuromancer to Ghost in the Shell, or the Matrix movies. Yeah, that's right, I even like the sequels. I understood all of the words in the architect scene. That means it must have been good.
Though the process has altered your consciousness, you remain irrevocably human. Ergo, some of my answers you will understand and some of them you will not. Concurrently, while your first question may be the most pertinent, you may or may not realize it is also the most irrelevant.
Rick and Morty fans didn't even have a big enough IQ to appreciate that scene.
I'm Pickle Rick! Rick! I'm Pickle Rick! Rick!
I also love the other criminally underrated Keanu Reeves cyberpunk movie, Johnny Mnemonic. I mean, come on, what's not to love? This has the weird late 90s visualized internet, this awesome laser garrote thing, Henry Rollins as an implant doctor, Ice-T as a wisecracking cyberpunk dreadlocked resistance leader, a contract killer who's a cyborg religious zealot, who kills people with a shepherd's crook and a crucifix dagger, and major spoilers, a super intelligent dolphin who is a world-class hacker. And in all of this craziness, Keanu Reeves' character has to download information out of a chip in his brain before it overheats and kills him.
Now suddenly, I'm responsible for the entire fucking world! And everybody and his mother is trying to kill me if my head doesn't blow up first.
Hey, that's pretty funny. That's just like the chip that we put in your brain.
What?
We put that in years ago. Alex Jones tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen. We just never had the need to activate it. I knew you were gonna refuse, so I activated it before I even called you.
Just when I think I'm out, they
pull me back in. That's not even a Harrison Ford quote.
Shut up!
That little baby's gonna overload in about 30 minutes. And be careful, because the more stupidity you deal with, the more likely it is that that little chip's gonna heat up and cook your brain.
Well, let's get started. Roll a clip.
Video games, movies, comics, anything that brings us enjoyment, Anita Sarkeesian likes to take a fucking steaming feminist dump on it. And now it's time for us to take a steaming anti-feminist fucking dump on her. I'm sure she'll like it. I'll smear it all over her face. You like that, Anita?
Well, we're off to a great start.
I'll smear it all over her face. You like that, Anita? Huh? You like that? You like that, Anita? You like that, Anita? You like that, Anita? You like that? You like that, Anita?
It's kind of creepy.
Okay, so I talked about this a little bit in my Ghost in the Shell video, but Andy just hit one of my biggest pet peeves. And he brings this up multiple times, which for some reason seems to be a gigantic complaint amongst gamers and nerd culture for some reason. And it mostly seems to be leveled against feminist critique in particular, and especially against Anita Sarkeesian, which I'll preface the rest of this by saying that I don't necessarily agree with all of her criticism and critique, or everything that she says. I have some issues with it, but overall I think she does a pretty good job of giving a baseline introduction to film criticism and feminism. But for some reason, I'll leave it up to you lovely people to figure out what that reason is, she gets way more criticism than any other film critic. There's this general idea amongst a lot of people for some reason, that if you criticize something at all, you must absolutely hate it. And as much as I hate CinemaSins, their tagline actually sums this up pretty well. No movie is without sin. And that includes the movies that we love. Just because someone criticizes something doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it. And do you know who else agrees with that? Anita Sarkeesian.
But remember that it's both possible, and even necessary, to simultaneously enjoy media while also being critical of its more problematic or pernicious aspects.
I mean, she's said this in about every single one of her videos, yet for some reason she's characterized as someone who wants you to hate every single movie unless it perfectly fits her standard. I think talking about where films fail is actually more useful than talking about where they succeed. You learn more from a failure than you do from a success. And Blade Runner absolutely deserves criticism, despite it being one of my favorite movies.
I would also like to add something.
Nyx Fears, what are you doing here? Oh no, let me guess. Chip in the brain?
Yeah, chip in the brain. That's what it says right here on the paper for me to say at the beginning of this. Hi, I'm May, and I run the Nyx Fears channel, and I, like you, am on a journey to understand the meaning in all of this. Criticism is weird because it's something that we all know how to do, but we all struggle kind of doing it in a meaningful way. And ultimately, I think it comes down to like taking a really good look in the mirror and asking ourselves why it is that we do this. Why do we tell stories? Like, what are we trying to convey about our world? Are we being fair? Have we totally considered what a film might be trying to say before we start criticizing it? It's kind of common now for criticism to kind of feel like this antagonistic, like aggressive act against the art itself. I mean, we're so used to the angry critic or the nitpicky critic or the objective critic that, you know, they don't take into consideration like fully what a film means before they assign it a letter grade or a number or, you know, a thumbs up or thumbs down. And you know, I think we owe each other more than that. I think we owe each other a real conversation. What about this work isn't reducible to other things? How does this work use its medium in a way that says things that words just can't? I'm not saying that we must always be positive or something ridiculous like that. I'm saying that criticism is valid, and maybe what we need to do is hone in on the untruth of what a work is saying instead of like endlessly talking about how it's saying it. Criticism is something that is wholly valuable, but insofar that it, like the art that it's criticizing, has the capacity for real impact. It's not about being right or wrong, good or bad, or whether or not we liked the work or not. You know, are we being helpful? Or are we just being destructive? What are we really saying?
Wow, what a thoughtful and nuanced perspective on film criticism. Well, enough of that crap. Let's get back to Andy's video.
Fans of classic science fiction rejoice! The Hollywood Nostalgia Machine is about to deliver a sequel to Ridley Scott's incredibly influential cult film, Blade Runner.
And now I'm gonna pick it apart and ruin everything you love about it.
I don't know if this was an accidental slip on Andy's part, but when he says she's gonna pick this apart and ruin everything you love about it, Anita Sarkeesian brings up rape, slavery, racism, cultural appropriation. Are these the things that Andy loved about the film? Because that's kind of really troubling, especially given his new stance on race realism. Look, just because you criticize something doesn't mean that you like it. I criticize everything, especially the things that I like, because I know more about those things.
Blade Runner 2049 is finally going to give us some answers to those burning questions that have plagued our collective psyche for years. Questions like, shouldn't there be more Latinx people in the Los Angeles of the future?
That was not the question.
No one gives a shit about that question.
Ever thought about that question watching this movie.
Can we say Latina? Like, when did it X? When did it become Latina X?
Okay, so I didn't know what Latinx meant either, and be careful searching it, because it's spelled like this, not like this. I had to clear my browser history after I searched Latina X, but apparently Latinx is a general neutral way to say Latina or Latino. But you know, God forbid you two have to learn anything.
Are we just gonna pretend like Deckard's assault of Rachel was A-okay because there was a romantic saxophone wailing in the background? Do androids dream of electric sheep?
Was that fucking funny? That was funny!
No, it was not.
Electric sheep!
No, it was...
Electric sheep!
I'll fucking kill you.
Well, we've now established that Anita Sarkeesian has more nerd cred than both of the Warskis. Andy, you big dummy. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is a Philip K. Dick novel that Blade Runner is based on. I seriously think knowing that this movie was based on that book is the most known fact about this movie. Besides maybe knowing that this movie had 5 different versions, and knowing that Rutger Hauer improvised his famous Tears in the Rain line. Andy, how do you not know this?
Blade Runner uses the existence of replicants to explore questions of what it really means to be human, and in many ways, it's a rich, complex, and fascinating film. But the way it tackles those issues is by focusing on the humanity of white men, like so much media does.
Alright, off the rails. What are you
left, right, and center here?
I'm sure you're assuming that in this world, black people don't own androids as well. Hmm?
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? You don't assume that Asians, a lot of Asian people in Blade Runner, you're assuming that they don't own any. So only white people can afford android robots? Because the main character's white, that's all we really follow? Hmm?
Well, I mean, we don't really know, because there aren't any Asians who are main characters, and there aren't any black people whatsoever. So in a medium like film, which is visual, we don't know unless the movie shows us. Andy, that's kind of her point.
As a result, it effectively leaves women and people of color on the margins of who is really deserving of being considered human.
Oh, go get fucked. It's a robot! It's not... Where do people of color come into this? You're making it about people of color.
Stop imagining these ideas, Anita.
It's about robots, and when you make them sentient, how they react with actual humans, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you have their emotions in there and they become rogue and start killing people and start doing fucked up things, now we have to stop them because we built these robots. That's what it's about. It's not about white people owning robots and black people not being able to afford robots. You have made a problem out of nothing.
Andy, for the love of God, do you not understand what an allegory is? So as someone who edits videos, admittedly very poorly, I noticed something interesting here, because an old trick that I learned years ago was that whenever somebody criticizes Anita Sarkeesian, it's very important to go and watch Anita's actual video, because a lot of the times, her videos are edited out of context. Like in this case.
In Blade Runner, replicants have thoughts, feelings, and desires just like people do, but society doesn't want to acknowledge that they're basically human, because that would mean acknowledging that using them for slave labor is wrong. Blade Runner uses the existence of replicants to explore questions of what it really means to be human.
So specifically talking about this movie, the film literally uses the word slave in the opening title crawl. And at the end of the film, Roy Batty literally says,
"Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave."
Not only that, the director clearly had in mind that it was going to be an allegory for slaves.
And the only extremity will be that will we ever disintegrate or deteriorate enough to actually make human beings into slave labor, or human beings into the spearhead of armies that won't go into these places that we want them to, or in those days, the idea of spearhead groups going into space. Also, there's a kind of exotic sexuality to the idea that we've got to tread very carefully how we talk about this, but the idea of replication of beautiful females and their various uses, that's very much there and very prevalent there, particularly with the beautiful Rachel and the so-called pleasure models that we talk about with the other two gals. It was a delicate matter, but I think we always kept on the right side of delicacy and the possibilities being outrageous, and through that, the outrage is most strongly expressed by one of the slaves, who was Roy Batty, who is oddly more human than human, making Deckard understand the outrage that was being carried out.
Andy, that's not subtext. That's text!
Well, you'd be surprised what a guy go through to get a glimpse of a beautiful body.
It's so sexist. It's so sexist.
So Andy was watching this video, and he wanted to make this joke, but he purposely cut this out.
As a result, it effectively leaves women and people of color on the margins of who is really deserving of being considered human.
Well, you'd be surprised what a guy go through to get a glimpse of a beautiful body.
No, I wouldn't.
You see, that, not so subtly, shows that this woman has experienced a lot of fucked up things. Similar to how this weird guy is invading her space and is kind of ogling her. Like, yeah, that's pretty fucking sexist, Andy. And it's also pretty dishonest editing.
Of the 4 rogue replicants Deckard is hunting, 2 are female. Pris, designed as a standard pleasure model, and Zora, who works as an exotic dancer.
But let's not talk about the males. Let's just focus on the females.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
that works,
because
that works for the narrative.
if we throw in the 2 equal balancing male robots, it will fuck up my entire narrative. So I'll just throw them away and talk about the 2 female robots and act like those male robots are nothing and talk about females because females rule the world.
Because of these roles Pris and Zora find themselves in, you could argue that Blade Runner offers a valuable critique of how our culture oppresses women. Both Pris and Zora are prisoners of patriarchy.
Even though we just talked about 2 male robots that aren't mentioned in her video because she doesn't care about men.
Mm-hmm. But prisoners of patriarchy.
Patriarchy,
you forgot.
I mean, the other half would completely ruin your entire point. But let's not talk about that.
Well, no, because the movie already focuses on the male replicants. Like Anita Sarkeesian said, you already understand the plight that they're going through, because the movie lets you experience it through their eyes. The entire point of this criticism is that you don't get that same experience through the eyes of the female robots. So here's another really big problem with feminist critique, is people criticizing feminism who don't understand what the fuck feminism is. This is partially a fault on the terminology that feminists use, because I think it's kind of unclear and in some cases a bit alienating to people. The straight one man! Patriarchy, for example, doesn't only apply to women. It's bad for everybody in society. Men are negatively affected by the patriarchy too. Granted, the structure allows men to have more control, but it still negatively affects men. And we can see that play out within the film, where male robots are primarily designed to do heavy labor or combat. And once again, all of this is covered in the film.
Both die at Deckard's hands after desperate fights to survive.
After going rogue and fucking people up. I'm just fixing what she was saying.
This is literally like Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
You're trying to save them, even though they're causing destruction.
Yeah.
No, they need equal rights. No, you don't. Not when you're destroying shit.
So here's a question I would love to have Andy answer. Back in history when we had slaves in America, if a slave tried to escape, and during that escape they had to kill their slave master or people hunting them, would that be justified in order for them to escape an oppressive system? Because Andy seems to imply, probably more out of stupidity than malice, that the people who were hired to come up to the north and find and catch slaves and bring them back to the south were totally justified. Because in the eyes of the slaveholders, they went rogue and fucked people up. And I think Chris has one of the weirdest critiques of Black Lives Matter that I've ever heard. I mean, oh fuck. Oh god, we're just rolling all of the stupid anti-SJW shit into one video here. Even if we take your stereotype of Black Lives Matter members that are destroying stuff, they still deserve equal rights, even if they break the law. If they break the law, they should have the equal rights of a white person who also breaks the law, which there is an undeniable amount of evidence which shows that that is not the case. And that's kind of the entire point behind Black Lives Matter. How can you be this wrong about so many things in one video?
But then, unfortunately, there's the replicant Rachel, Deckard's love interest. That's our moody hero, preventing a woman from leaving his apartment and forcing her to accept his physical advances.
Oh, that robot actually is programmed to enjoy submission. Oh. So that was actually, everything was fine in that scene. Okay. It went over really well.
There we go, yeah. Look, this movie shows a white man being rapey towards a female robot, right? Therefore what? All white men are rapey? What's your fucking point? It's a fucking movie!
Yes, Andy. She's saying that all men are rapists because of this. That's clearly what she meant when she said,
"That's our moody hero, preventing a woman from leaving his apartment and forcing her to accept his physical advances." Meanwhile, the movie itself tries to frame this mind-boggling scene as a seduction. You know, just because there's cheesy romantic saxophone music playing, that doesn't make it any less assault. It's still totally assault. Yet, in the end, despite his reprehensible behavior, Deckard gets the girl, and the two of them run off together, totally undermining any concerns about patriarchy that Pris and Zora may have raised.
You just heard her say that. And the director, Ridley Scott, even agreed that this scene was poorly shot.
I think she's frightened. He's falling definitely for her. She's frightened of feeling that relationship occur. She doesn't understand the feeling inside her, which is making her like this man, right? And I think we're probably short of the lines to make this really evolve and understand it. And I think they were a bit uneasy about it, and because I was uneasy about it, so I think it's one of the scenes which is fully least successful in the movie. I think more words probably in this instance, a bit harsh in the way it was pushed. That's probably my fault.
So that's kind of the point. It's saying that this depiction of sex is pretty fucking rapey, and that's kind of a problem within film, because like we've seen in Hollywood, there are a lot of people who kind of ignore pretty rapey things.
Ultimately, the story isn't really about the women. They may be on the sidelines of Blade Runner's future society, but they're also on the sidelines of the script.
Oh, they chose a main character and focused on the main character? How dare they!
All movies have to have female lead characters, otherwise it's terrible.
Yeah.
Now I understand your logic.
Fucking Harrison Ford's the main character. What do you want?
Well, no. I mean, in the next scene, she talks about two male characters.
It's Rick Deckard and Roy Batty, the leader of the rogue replicants, who the film focuses on in its exploration of humanity.
She's just saying that they didn't take as much time to develop the female characters, and because of that, we lost the ability to see things through their perspective. And that kind of is a larger problem in film and video games. In the vast majority of cases, we see things through the eyes of men, which is pretty boring. A lot of the times what Anita Sarkeesian is arguing is for more diversity because we get more interesting stories instead of the same type of story over and over again.
The film takes place in Los Angeles, one of the most diverse cities in the world, and despite being an overwhelmingly white film, Blade Runner knows it's a diverse city. The streets are full of Japanese noodle shops. Advertising targets people of different cultural backgrounds. And hey, they even gave Edward James Olmos and James Hong really small parts. And despite being such a diverse city, all of that diversity is nothing but background texture.
Diverse city?
I don't get it.
Diverse city. Diversity? Fuck yeah. Double meanings, bitch.
Boo! 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 Andy, this was the worst thing you did in the video. That was worse than you saying you were gonna smear shit on Anita Sarkeesian's face. Fuck that pun. Fuck you. Fuck this video.
Yet race doesn't enter at all into the film's concerns about oppression.
Because it's not about oppression. It's not written by Anita. It's a Ridley Scott movie. It's not about oppression.
That's right. Because Ridley Scott has never done movies that feature themes of oppression. Nope. Not never. Not once. Not one time did he make a movie like that. Boy, I sure hope that there aren't any movies scrolling across the screen that in fact do feature themes of oppression, because that would really make me and Andy look like a bunch of fucking idiots. Now wouldn't it, Andy? That doesn't even make sense. There's no nerve endings in your brain. Your brain can't feel pain. Why does this hurt?
God forbid they decide to make a whole environment from a culture to include it in a great movie. You can't do that now because it's bad.
That's like saying, oh, in Toronto, it sucks because Chinatown is just one area. Why isn't the entire city Chinese? You know what I mean?
Because it's Canada.
Yeah.
Oh my
God.
God.
This is Los Angeles, and
That's
God
right.
forbid, they showed fucking the Asian culture for a minute and made you go, wait, why isn't it everywhere?
No, you two seem to still be missing the point here. The point isn't that you can't involve another culture in a movie. If anything, we should have more of that, because it leads to more interesting films. The issue that she's addressing is that we shouldn't just have it as background texture. If you make another culture prominent in your movie, but you don't bring up any themes that are associated with that, you're missing out on things that you could be exploring in the movie. And themes like racism and racial relations are something that this movie could very easily explore.
Ironically, by centering whiteness so much, the film subtly perpetuates the very real-life issues of oppression and marginalization that it appears to be concerned with.
That's the whole point of the movie.
Yes.
Marginalization of androids, just like X-Men, marginalizations of fucking mutants.
Can we enjoy it without all
without
this bullshit?
without getting shit on? Don't, like, you want us to not like the movie? Is that your point? Because you're failing miserably.
And I happen to notice one more strategic edit here. Why do you think Andy and Chris cut out this part?
But it's not as if the film is unaware of racism. The original theatrical release actually had a voiceover from Decker that equates the persecution of replicants with racial persecution.
I've got 4 skin jobs walking the streets.
Skin jobs. That's what Bryant called replicants. In history books, he's the kind of cop used to call black men.
Do you think it's because it totally destroys the reactionary over-the-top argument? So apparently you do understand what a fucking allegory is. You just contradicted yourself. Like, do you think your audience is so stupid that they can't remember your previous statements?
Because it's not about oppression. It's not about oppression. That's the whole point of the movie.
Yes.
Marginalization of androids.
How do you contradict yourself this quickly? This movie, just like X-Men, is a theme about oppression, and mutants, or replicants in this movie, are surrogates for races, or women, or the poor, or any group of people who are oppressed, kept down outsiders. Obviously, her point isn't that you shouldn't like this movie, considering that she said it was a good movie, and is also saying that these things should be talked about more.
And in many ways, it's a rich, complex, and fascinating film. But the way it tackles those issues is by focusing on the humanity of white men, like so much media does.
Meaning that she agrees that these are good things to talk about. At this point, I think it's really clear that these two are just creating outrage. I mean, they can't even be consistent about what they're outraged about. And unfortunately, it seems like this outrage generation works. Because if you look at Andy's comments, it's filled with nothing but comments of people who didn't watch the original video, who don't understand the film criticism, and who just lap up everything that these two knuckleheads have been saying.
Or will the sequel still serve up a vision of the future that seems to have hatched from the minds of white men who think neon signs with Japanese characters on them are cool and futuristic, but don't want to actually have significant Japanese characters in their movie? I guess we'll see.
Why don't you go watch Japanese movies?
There's tons.
There's fucking millions of them, and there's no white people. You'd love it. You'd love it. There's not one white male in it. It's all Asian people.
Well, I mean, that might be an issue. But the difference is that we aren't in Japan. We're in America, which is an extremely diverse country, yet our media doesn't represent those diverse groups. That's kind of the entire point of this critique.
The cast has some actors of color in it, and who knows, maybe Edward James Olmos has a slightly bigger part this time.
And if he doesn't, then who gives a flying fuck?
That's right! Oh, God.
Anyway, everyone, thank you for watching. Anita, thank you for trying to ruin another thing that people love.
And there it is, right at the end. Because if you ever criticize a movie, that must mean that you hate the movie and you want to ruin it for everybody, instead of sparking a conversation for people to think about things. And that's really the problem here, because Andy and Chris don't want people to think about things, because as soon as people start thinking about things, they're gonna see through their bullshit. So there we go. I'm finally done with this video.
Well, congratulations, Disconnect. You managed to pull it off.
Can we get that chip out of my brain now?
Yeah, about that. We actually never figured out how to turn those off. It's gonna go off no matter what.
What? Well, we made it to the end of the video. I want to take this opportunity to thank Nyx Fears for taking the time out of their busy schedule to write and record the best part of this video. If somehow you're subscribed to me and not to them, links to their channel are in the description. There you can find great reviews and amazing film analysis. Oh, you're finally done with the video. It's about time.
Who the hell are you?
I'm the real you.
What?
Yeah, now that I have a bigger budget, thanks to the wonderful people at Patreon, I could afford to just make a replicant to do the videos for me. It saves a lot of time and effort.
No.
Actually, I'm just joking. You're really a watermelon.
No.
A watermelon that's part of a simulation.
No.
You've just been Black Mirrored.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
I want to thank the fantastic people who have all become my patrons. You lovely people are the reason why I get to make ridiculous stuff like this video. And I want to give a very special thank you to Adam00, Ewan Wardle, Google Hushby Valley, or I'll give you a swirly, Miss Contrary, and Sleepy Slug. Ooh, that one's really fun to say. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video. Oh my god, okay, you might wanna...
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
That right there is the last undebunked reactionary video. There goes my mustache.